Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about learning on your company time. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, do you think companies should allow developers to learn and take courses on company time as opposed to only their own free time? In the past, I've worked in a company where you could allocate some of the weekly work hours to learning, and I really thought that was a great policy that allowed developers to keep their skills sharp. But I haven't seen this implemented in any other company, and I wonder why. Well, then I suspect that you and I have been to different companies or had different experience. I usually find that a lot of companies have something similar to this. Not, of course, not all of them, especially it might be rarer for certain smaller companies, and in some cases, of course, consultancies and like larger organizations as well. But I found that quite a lot of companies have this policy. The amount of learning it always varies. Everything from it's once a month, once a week you have an hour every Friday or something like that. There's tons of these flavors of it, and I usually say to companies that I promote you doing this, and I promise you, I will not make this a case about you should keep your people sharp, you should do A, B, and C, and so forth. I'll give you my take on why you should do it, and hopefully it will actually make more sense from a business perspective, and this doesn't just turn into another Hail Mary for, hey, make sure that you invest in your workers. Hey, let's make sure that you teach people the skills and so forth and focus on, humanitarian things and education of the staff and so forth versus just cold hard cash. Let's try to make a sell for not just the things that I'm talking about, because those things are true, but also the cold hard cash thing. So the thing I will tell you, and now I'm trying to speak to you more as a business person than as a software developer, is that most of the time, if you have an investment in such a course or some program like that you can do some learning, you will find, and I want you to just go and talk to all your manager friends, all your line managers. Ask them, because every single one of these platforms, doesn't matter if it's Codecademy, Udemy, it's Pluralsight, like there's tons of these learning platforms. Practically all of them they have a corporate account, and they will tell you how much time do the software developers actually spend on like certain courses or videos or things like that. And I will bet you that it's a fraction of the time that if you now just do the math, if you calculate how many hours of work do you lose per developer to this thing, you will see that most of them never finish a course, most of them never actually study, and so forth, because the priority of a software developer is in 90% of the time going to be to finish their own story card. And you see that in usually, like the places it happens, is usually in any time allocation that they could have that relates to something other than that thing, and that is learning by themselves and helping their coworkers. Now, in the helping with the coworkers sort of situation, that's a different video. I've talked about that as well. You have to basically fix that, because otherwise you actually do lose money, or you don't really get as much code out the door as you would like, because people are not actually helping the people that they depend on and that depend on them. But for this specific situation, this basically means that if you buy an account, you won't actually lose much more than the cost of maintaining it. And like a nice thing to do is don't buy like a bulk account, like where you have a certain amount of slots, and if you don't use them, you lose them. Find a learning platform that basically gives you opt-in, like you can add more people and pay for increasing cost for subscriptions or something like that. Don't go bulk, because as I said, you're not going to make anything from that money usually. Most of the software developers, and in many cases, guys, these things, you might think that this is going to help you. Yeah, sure. If you don't know the first thing about something, some of these things are going to teach you the basics and so forth. But this idea that some managers pitch that it's going to make a big difference in the productivity of the software developer is usually not true. It's usually not the case. I will go as far as to say that I've never ever seen a software developer who got a account like this go from I don't really know what I'm doing to I'm pretty good at this thing. It does happen, but I've never seen it happen in a like in a job environment or something like that. I'm sure there are situations where it does happen. Anywho, what I'm trying to sell you on is that so you know that you're not really going to see a drop in productivity from this thing, and the cost usually for one of these accounts is on average not that much for a company. But what you do gain from it is that you gain a very good persuasive argument when you're doing recruitment, because this is something that a lot of people care about. And that's one of those weird things, in my opinion. Like it's kind of funny. It's what people say that they want, but when you give it to them, they don't actually use it. In my opinion, it's very similar to the everybody wants to, everybody goes to the gym, or everybody has a gym membership, but not everybody goes. That sort of thing. Like they like the idea. They really like the idea of being that sort of person who goes and gets fit and being fit and all that stuff. But when you actually look at what they do, as I like to say, don't listen to what people say, look at what they do, their behavior speaks a very different story. And software development is no different. These platforms usually go completely unused. And so what you find most often is that this becomes something that sounds really good when you're trying to make people come and work for you. It's something you can promote on your websites or like as a part of your whatever outreach programs you might have, or corporate branding if you like to call it that. It's something that your recruiters can use when they connect with the candidates and so forth and so forth. It's a good, as I said, it's a very cheap and fairly persuasive thing to have. There's only a handful of things that will truly persuade a software developer to go, yeah, this sounds like a nice place to work. And this is one of those sorts of things, because it tells, I'm not saying that it tells a story, but it indicates a company culture. And that is something that you really desperately want, I argue at the very least, and most people who do recruitment will hopefully agree with me, that you need every argument that you can get to get the really good software developers to just go, yeah, I might take that phone call with you, or so forth and so forth, because most of them are already spoken for. So if you can spend like a fraction, like a tiny sliver of money here, and save money on the time it takes to recruit people, or like in recruitment consultancy hours, for example, when you're talking to recruiters and so forth, it might be worth considering that this is actually good for your bottom line as opposed to just being a cost. So what I want you to take away from this is that I think that in general it's a very easy win for companies to offer on the job learning types of thing. Depending on region, it might be a very important thing. Like you can't just hire and fire as you want, and so you are left with the option of education for some people. But even so, I would say on average it's a good investment. Even if you're the money hungriest company in the world, this in my opinion makes sense, because if you're hiring, you need persuasive arguments, and this is a very low cost, and usually it's not something that you're going to see much fall, like it's not going to really affect your delivery speed in many cases, because a token type of thing like this is worth basically nothing when you might get into the organization, perhaps. As I said, most people are not using it, it doesn't affect anything. But it's a very good thing to be able to say for PR reasons, for corporate branding, etc., etc. And it's a very good argument or persuasive thing to mention when you're doing a personal interview with a new candidate. Because, as I said, a lot of developers care about their education and feeling that they're part of a company that quote unquote cares about their future. And this is one way that you indicate that. And even if it's just a small sliver of a thing that they're getting, it is something to mention, and it does have an effect, just as mentioning salaries and after works and all this sort of stuff. It's just another I'm not saying trick, it's just another argument for you, and it comes at a very low cost. Have a great day.